My stepmother announced she was cutting me from Dad's will at the reading. The lawyer started laughing. The law offices of Sterling and Associates smelled like old leather and older secrets. I sat in the waiting room, studying the oil paintings of stern-faced partners while my stepmother Victoria held court with her children, Tyler and Autumn, planning their spending sprees with whispered excitement. "First thing I'm doing is buying that Maserati," Tyler announced, scrolling through his phone. "The red one we saw at the dealership in Beverly Hills." "I'm thinking a penthouse in Manhattan," Autumn added, flipping her platinum blonde hair. "Something chic, maybe 40 floors up with a view of Central Park." Victoria patted their hands with her perfectly manicured nails, the same nails that had been digging into my father's fortune for the past 6 years. "Now children, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll discuss investments after we handle the formalities." She shot me a look of pure venom across the waiting room. I responded by checking my phone, pretending to be absorbed in emails while she continued her performance. "Though I don't know why she even bothered showing up," Victoria stage whispered. "Robert made his wishes very clear before he died." Robert. She couldn't even call him my father, even now. The receptionist appeared. "Mr. Sterling will see you all now." We filed into the conference room where Jonathan Sterling waited, my father's will-folder spread before him. He was trying very hard to maintain his professional composure, but something around his eyes suggested he was fighting back amusement. "Please, everyone have a seat," he said, gesturing to the chairs. "Can I offer anyone water? Coffee? This might take a while." "Let's just get this over with," Victoria said briskly, settling into what she clearly thought was the power position at the head of the table. "I have a meeting with my financial advisor at 3. "Of course." Mr. Sterling opened the folder. "First, let me express my condolences on the loss of Robert Chen. He was a client for over 30 years, Anne." Yes, very sad," Victoria interrupted. "Now, about the estate division." Mr. Sterling's eye twitched slightly. "Indeed. Let's begin with the reading of Mr. Chen's last will and testament, dated, let me see, 6 years ago." "6 years?" I asked quietly. "Wasn't it updated more recently?" Victoria's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. "Oh sweetie, you really don't understand how these things work, do you? Robert and I revised everything after our wedding. Made sure the estate stayed in the immediate family." "The immediate family," I repeated. "Meaning the people who actually cared for him in his final years," Victoria said sweetly. "Not the daughter who barely visited, too busy with her little teaching job to spend time with her father." I thought about all the visits she'd mysteriously scheduled during her yoga classes, the family dinner she'd forgotten to tell me about, the time she told my father I was too busy when he'd asked about me. "Shall we proceed?" Mr. Sterling asked, and again that strange glimmer of suppressed mirth. "Please do," Victoria said. "I believe you'll find everything is quite straightforward. The estate is divided between myself and my children, with a small token left to charity." She paused dramatically, savoring the moment. "As for Alora here, she gets nothing," Victoria announced triumphantly, unable to contain herself any longer. "I made sure of it. 6 years of marriage, and I finally got Robert to see sense about his ungrateful daughter. You're not in the will, Alora. Not 1 penny." The room fell silent. Tyler and Autumn were grinning like sharks who'd scented blood. Victoria looked like a cat who'd swallowed an entire aviary. That's when Mr. Sterling started laughing. Not a chuckle, not a professional clearing of the throat, a full, genuine laugh that echoed off the mahogany panels. "I'm sorry," he said, wiping his eyes. "That was unprofessional. It's just, Mrs. Chen, do you know what a revocable living trust is?" Victoria's triumphant expression flickered. "Of course I do. It's a financial instrument." "Very good," Mr. Sterling said, still fighting back chuckles. "And do you know when Robert established his family trust?" "Family trust?" Victoria snapped. "He only had 1 child." "Huh." "Actually," Mr. Sterling pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. "Robert established the Chen Family Trust 29 years ago when Alora was 8. It's been growing ever since." "So?" Victoria's voice was losing its confidence. "He revoked it when we updated the will." "Did he?" Mr. Sterling pulled out a document. "Because I have here the trust documents, including all amendments." The last one was made 14 months ago. Victoria said nothing, her face beginning to pale under her expensive foundation. You know what's interesting about trusts, Mrs. Chen? Mr. Sterling continued. They're completely separate from wills. And in this case, the trust was structured to transfer all assets to Alora on either her 38th birthday or upon Robert's death, whichever came first. That's impossible, Victoria whispered. Alora, Mr. Sterling turned to me, when was your birthday? 15 months ago, I said quietly. Dad threw me a party. A small one. Victoria was at a spa retreat in Napa. Ah yes, Mr. Sterling nodded. The weekend Robert came to see me. He was quite specific about the timing. Wanted to make sure everything transferred cleanly before any potential complications. The color was draining from Victoria's face like water from a broken dam. Mr. Sterling said, turning back to Victoria, you can't change a trust that already transferred $62 million last year. Victoria's face went white as fresh paper. Her mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. 62. Tyler's voice cracked. 62 million. Actually, Mr. Sterling corrected, that was the value 15 months ago. With market performance and dividend reinvestments, it's currently valued at approximately 71 million. But the houses. Autumn shrieked. The cars. The bank accounts. All held by the trust, Mr. Sterling explained patiently, which transferred to Alora last year. You've been living in Alora's houses, driving Alora's cars, and spending Alora's money for the past 15 months. I finally spoke. Dad told me to wait. Said it would be better to let everything play out naturally. He wanted to see if you'd change, Victoria. If you'd stop being so. I searched for the word, calculating. This is fraud. Victoria spat. We'll sue. Robert wasn't in his right mind. Actually, Mr. Sterling pulled out a medical report. Robert had a comprehensive cognitive evaluation 14 months ago. Perfect scores across the board. He also had 3 psychiatrists confirm his mental capacity. He was sharp as a tack and twice as pointed. His words, not mine. But why? Tyler asked, looking genuinely confused. Why would he do this? I looked at him with something almost like pity. Because he saw what you were doing. All of you. The credit cards you took out in his name, Tyler. The jewelry you bought and charged to his accounts, Autumn. And you, Victoria. I turned to my stepmother. The systematic isolation from his friends and family. The medication mix-ups that kept him foggy. The way you moved your mother into the guest house without asking. You can't prove any of that, Victoria hissed. I don't have to, I said. Dad already did. He hired a private investigator 2 years ago. Would you like to see the reports? Mr. Sterling produced another folder, thick with photographs and documents. Robert was particularly interested in your first marriage, Mrs. Chen. How did your first husband die again? Medication mix-up, wasn't it? The silence in the room was deafening. But Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. And neither was I. Mr. Sterling continued briskly, let's discuss the actual will. It's quite simple. To my beloved wife Victoria Chen, I leave the sum of $1, the amount she truly deserves. To Tyler and Autumn Whitfield, I leave the same. The remainder of my estate, consisting mainly of personal effects since the trust already transferred all assets, goes to Alora. He pulled out 3 crisp $1 bills and placed them on the table with ceremonial precision. $1. Autumn whispered, staring at the bill like it might bite her. Actually, I said, reaching into my purse, I have something for each of you. I pulled out 3 official envelopes. Eviction notices. You have 30 days to vacate my properties. All of them. You can't evict us. Victoria stood up so fast her chair tipped over. I'm his widow. You're a tenant, I corrected, living rent-free in my house. Well, houses. The main estate, the beach house in Monterey, the mountain cabin in Tahoe, and whatever apartment Tyler's been keeping in downtown San Francisco. How did you, Tyler started. The same way Dad knew about your gambling debts, I said. And Autumn's shopping addiction. And Victoria's interesting investment history. You weren't nearly as clever as you thought. Victoria's perfectly composed facade was cracking like old paint. We trusted him. We took care of him. You took care of yourselves, I replied. Dad saw the difference. Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. There is one more matter. Robert's letter, to be read after the will. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to me. He insisted you read it aloud. I opened it, recognizing my father's precise handwriting. My hands weren't shaking, they were steady as stone. My dearest Alora, I began, if you're reading this, then our plan worked perfectly. I'm sorry for the deception, but I needed to know who Victoria really was, and I needed you protected while I found out. Victoria's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. You were right to be suspicious when I remarried so quickly after your mother's death. Your instincts have always been excellent. What you didn't know was that I was already sick. The cancer diagnosis came just weeks after the wedding. I paused, remembering those quiet conversations we'd had, the way Dad had asked me to trust him when everything seemed to be falling apart. The letter continued, and with it, the final revelation that would destroy Victoria's world completely. I continued reading Dad's letter. I thought Victoria would care for me, but instead she revealed her true nature. Thank you for trusting me when I asked you to play along. Thank you for pretending to be pushed aside while I moved assets into the trust. Thank you for letting them think they'd won while we secured your future. Victoria was gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. To Victoria, Tyler, and Autumn, I read on, I know exactly what you are. The investigators' reports are with the district attorney, who promised to review them after my death. I suggest you use your 30-day notice wisely. The DA. Tyler's voice cracked. Alora, my daughter, I continued, you are everything I could have hoped for, strong, patient, intelligent, and above all, good. Take care of the fortune I've left you, but more importantly, take care of yourself. All my love, Dad. I folded the letter carefully. There's a P.S. Your mother's engagement ring is in my desk drawer, second on the left. I hid it when Victoria started eyeing it. It's yours now, as she always intended. By the time I finished reading, Victoria had collapsed back into her chair. Tyler was frantically texting, probably his bookie. Autumn was crying, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Is there anything else? Victoria asked Mr. Sterling, her voice barely a whisper. Just this, he said, pulling out one more document. A restraining order. Alora filed it this morning. You're to have no contact with her after you vacate the properties. Any attempt to contest the trust or will shall result in immediate enforcement. You planned this, Victoria said, staring at me with something between hatred and grudging respect. You both planned this. Dad planned it, I corrected. I just followed his lead. Just like you followed the same playbook you used on your first husband. Oh, did you think Dad didn't know about Charles? About the insurance policy? About the medication you gave him? That was never proven, Victoria said quickly. No, I agreed. But it's interesting how history repeats itself. Or would have, if Dad hadn't been smarter than you gave him credit for. I stood, gathering my copies of the documents. Mr. Sterling, thank you for everything. For helping my father protect what mattered most to him. My pleasure, he said, still fighting back a smile. Your father was a brilliant man. This was the most elegant estate planning I've ever seen. As I reached the door, Victoria called out, Alora, please. I was his wife. Doesn't that count for something? I turned back one last time. It counts for exactly what you put into the marriage. Lies, manipulation, and greed. Dad figured out your true value, Victoria. $1. He was generous. I wouldn't have given you that much. I left them there, sitting in their shock, staring at their dollar bills. In the parking lot, I sat in my car, not the trust's anymore, actually mine, and let out a breath I'd been holding for 15 months. My phone rang. It was Grace, Dad's nurse, the only one Victoria couldn't manage to fire. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as Dad predicted, I said. Down to Victoria's demand for proof. He'd be so proud, Grace said softly. He talked about you constantly those last weeks. Said you were the only person who never wanted anything from him but his time. I miss him, I admitted. I know, honey. But he made sure you'd be okay. That was all he cared about in the end. Not punishing them, though that was a nice bonus, just making sure you were protected. After we hung up, I drove to Woodlawn Cemetery. Dad's grave was covered in fresh flowers. I'd been coming every week, though Victoria had told everyone I never visited. "We did it, Dad," I whispered to the headstone. "Just like you planned." They never saw it coming. The wind rustled through the oak trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his laugh. The same one he'd had when we'd sat in Mr. Sterling's office 15 months ago, signing papers while Victoria spent a weekend at the spa. "She thinks she's so clever," he'd said then. "But clever and smart aren't the same thing. You're smart, Alora. You know the difference between taking care of someone and taking them for everything they have." I placed a single rose on his grave, his favorite, the yellow ones from Mom's garden that I still maintained, and headed home. Not to the estate where Victoria was probably frantically packing, but to the small house Dad had secretly bought in my name years ago. The one where I'd been living quietly, letting them think I was struggling while the trust accumulated wealth. Dad was right. Clever and smart weren't the same thing. Victoria was clever. But I had learned from the smartest man I'd ever known. 3 weeks later, I stood in the doorway of the main estate as the moving truck pulled away. Victoria, Tyler, and Autumn were gone, vanished into whatever new scheme they'd concocted. The restraining order ensured I'd never have to see them again. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if their toxic presence had been physically lifted from the walls. I walked through the room slowly, remembering better times when Mom was alive and laughter filled these halls. In Dad's study, I found Mom's ring exactly where he'd said it would be. The diamond caught the afternoon light, throwing rainbows across the mahogany desk where he'd spent so many hours building the fortune that would now let me live freely. My phone buzzed. Grace was texting about a foundation Dad had mentioned, something about helping other families avoid predatory relationships. He'd left detailed notes about his vision, along with a substantial endowment to make it happen. I smiled, understanding his final gift. This wasn't just about money or houses or cars. It was about purpose. About using what he'd protected to protect others. Outside, the gardener was pruning Mom's rose bushes. I'd asked him to come back. Victoria had fired him years ago, claiming the flowers were too expensive to maintain. But Dad had paid him secretly all these years to keep the garden alive, just like he'd kept me safe. As I walked through the roses, I thought about the letter I'd write to other daughters and sons who might be watching their inheritance slip away to manipulative step-parents. About the legal clinic I'd fund. About the investigators I'd hire to help families gather evidence. Victoria had been right about one thing. Dad had made his wishes very clear. But his true wish wasn't about money. It was about making sure love triumphed over greed, that family meant more than just blood, and that justice, however delayed, would always find its way. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mr. Sterling's number. "Jonathan? It's Alora. I'm ready to discuss the foundation." Dad always said the best revenge was living well, but I think he'd approve of this kind of justice too. Through the window of Dad's study, I could see his favorite chair, the one where he'd sit reading to me as a child. Victoria had reupholstered it in white leather, but I'd change it back to the warm brown fabric Mom had chosen. Some things were worth preserving exactly as they were. Just like the love between a father and daughter that no amount of money could buy, and no amount of scheming could destroy. The sun was setting over the estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Somewhere, Victoria was probably still plotting her next move, but it didn't matter anymore. Dad had taught me the most important lesson of all. True wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the people who loved you enough to protect you, even from beyond the grave. And that made me the richest woman in the world.